Genesis 39. Meanwhile, Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, where an Egyptian named Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, serving in the household of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and made him prosper in all he did, Joseph found favor in his sight and became his personal attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household and entrusted him with everything he owned. From the time that he put Joseph in charge of his household and all he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's household on account of him. The Lord's blessing was on everything he owned, both in his house and in his field. So Potiphar left all that he owned in Joseph's care. He did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well-built and handsome, and after some time his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph and said, "Sleep with me." But he refused. "Look," he said to his master's wife, "with me here, my master does not concern himself with anything in his house, and he has entrusted everything he owns to my care. No one in this house is greater than I am. He has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. So how could I do such a great evil and sin against God?" Although Potiphar's wife spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be near her. One day, however, Joseph went into the house to attend to his work, and not a single household servant was inside. She grabbed Joseph by his cloak and said, "Sleep with me." But leaving his cloak in her hand, he escaped and ran outside. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said, "this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came to me so he could sleep with me, but I screamed as loud as I could. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." So Potiphar's wife kept Joseph's cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him the same story. "The Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me. But when I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." When his master heard the story his wife told him, saying, "This is what your slave did to me," he burned with anger. So Joseph's master took him and had him thrown into the prison where the king's prisoners were confined. While Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him and extended kindness to him, granting him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. And the warden put all the prisoners under Joseph's care, so that he was responsible for all that was done in the prison. The warden did not concern himself with anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Genesis 40. Sometime later, the king's cupbearer and baker offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and imprisoned them in the house of the captain of the guard, the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he became their personal attendant. After they had been in custody for some time, both of these men, the Egyptian king's cupbearer and baker, who were being held in the prison, had a dream on the same night, and each dream had its own meaning. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were distraught. So he asked the officials of Pharaoh who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why are your faces so downcast today?" "We both had dreams," and they replied, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Don't interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. "In my dream there was a vine before me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As it budded, its blossoms opened, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into his cup, and placed the cup in his hand." Joseph replied, "This is the interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore your position. You will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you did when you were his cupbearer. But when it goes well for you, please remember me and show me kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh, that he might bring me out of this prison. For I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing for which they should have put me in this dungeon." When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was favorable, he said to Joseph, "I too had a dream. There were 3 baskets of white bread on my head. In the top basket were all sorts of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." Joseph replied, "This is the interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you on a tree. Then the birds will eat the flesh of your body. On the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he held a feast for all his officials, and in their presence he lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. Pharaoh restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that he once again placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But Pharaoh hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had described to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot all about him. Genesis 41. After 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing beside the Nile when 7 cows, sleek and well-fed, came up from the river and began to graze among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows, sickly and thin, came up from the Nile and stood beside the well-fed cows on the bank of the river. And the cows that were sickly and thin devoured the 7 sleek, well-fed cows. Then Pharaoh woke up, but he fell back asleep and dreamed a second time. 7 heads of grain, plump and ripe, came up on one stalk. After them, 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. And the thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 plump, ripe ones. Then Pharaoh awoke and realized it was a dream. In the morning his spirit was troubled, so he summoned all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I recall my failures. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he put me and the chief baker in the custody of the captain of the guard. One night both the chief baker and I had dreams, and each dream had its own meaning. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us individually, and it happened to us just as he had interpreted. I was restored to my position, and the other man was hanged." So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, who was quickly brought out of the dungeon. After he had shaved and changed his clothes, he went in before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." "I myself cannot do it," Joseph replied, "but God will give Pharaoh a sound answer." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "In my dream, I was standing on the bank of the Nile, when 7 cows, well-fed and sleek, came up from the river and began to graze among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows, sickly, ugly, and thin, came up. I have never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. Then the thin, ugly cows devoured the 7 well-fed cows that were there first. When they had devoured them, however, no one could tell that they had done so. Their appearance was as ugly as it had been before. Then I awoke. In my dream, I also saw 7 heads of grain, plump and ripe, growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads of grain sprouted, withered, thin, and scorched by the east wind. And the thin heads of grain swallowed the 7 plump ones. I told this dream to the magicians, but no one could explain it to me." At this, Joseph said to Pharaoh, "The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 ripe heads of grain are 7 years. The dreams have the same meaning. Moreover, the 7 thin, ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. Behold, 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in the land of Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will devastate the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered, since the famine that follows it will be so severe. Moreover, because the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 versions, the matter has been decreed by God, and he will carry it out shortly. Now therefore Pharaoh should look for a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh take action and appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. Under the authority of Pharaoh, let them collect all the excess food from these good years, that they may come and lay up the grain to be preserved as food in the cities. This food will be a reserve for the land during the 7 years of famine to come upon the land of Egypt. Then the country will not perish in the famine. This proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, "Can we find anyone like this man in whom the Spirit of God abides?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my house, and all my people are to obey your commands. Only with regard to the throne will I be greater than you." Pharaoh also told Joseph, "I hereby place you over all the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh removed the signet ring from his finger, put it on Joseph's finger, clothed him in garments of fine linen, and placed a gold chain around his neck. He had Joseph ride in his second chariot, with men calling out before him, "Bow the knee!" So he placed him over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh declared to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, but without your permission, no one in all the land of Egypt shall lift his hand or foot." Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphenath-Paneah, and he gave him Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, to be his wife. And Joseph took charge of all the land of Egypt. Now Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph left Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout the land of Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land brought forth bountifully. During those 7 years, Joseph collected all the excess food in the land of Egypt and stored it in the cities. In every city he laid up the food from the fields around it. So Joseph stored up grain in such abundance, like the sand of the sea, that he stopped keeping track of it, for it was beyond measure. Before the years of famine arrived, 2 sons were born to Joseph by Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On. Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, saying, "God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's household." And the second son he named Ephraim, saying, "God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction." When the 7 years of abundance in the land of Egypt came to an end, the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. And although there was famine in every country, there was food throughout the land of Egypt. When extreme hunger came to all the land of Egypt, and the people cried out to Pharaoh for food, he told all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you." When the famine had spread over all the land, Joseph opened up all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. And every nation came to Joseph in Egypt to buy grain, because the famine was severe over all the earth. Genesis 42. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why are you staring at one another? Look," he added, "I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us so that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, "I am afraid that harm might befall him." So the sons of Israel were among those who came to buy grain, since the famine had also spread to the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was the ruler of the land. He was the one who sold grain to all its people. So when his brothers arrived, they bowed down before him with their faces to the ground. And when Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them. But he treated them as strangers and spoke harshly to them. "Where have you come from?" he asked. "From the land of Canaan," they replied. "We are here to buy food." Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Joseph remembered his dreams about them and said, "You are spies. You have come to see if our land is vulnerable." "Not so, my lord," they replied. "Your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. Your servants are honest men, not spies." "No," he told them. "You have come to see if our land is vulnerable." But they answered, "Your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more." Then Joseph declared, "Just as I said, you are spies. And this is how you will be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of your number to get your brother. The rest of you will be confined so that the truth of your words may be tested. If they are untrue, then as surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies." So Joseph imprisoned them for 3 days, and on the third day he said to them, "I fear God. So do this and you will live. If you are honest, leave one of your brothers in custody, while the rest of you go and take back grain to relieve the hunger of your households. Then bring your youngest brother to me so that your words can be verified, that you may not die." And to this they consented. Then they said to one another, "Surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw his anguish when he pleaded with us, but we would not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us." And Reuben responded, "Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you would not listen. Now we must account for his blood." They did not realize that Joseph understood them, since there was an interpreter between them, and he turned away from them and wept. When he turned back and spoke to them, he took Simeon from them and had him bound before their eyes. Then Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, to return each man's silver to his sack, and to give them provisions for their journey. This order was carried out, and they loaded the grain on their donkeys and departed. At the place where they lodged for the night, one of them opened his sack to get feed for his donkey, and he saw his silver in the mouth of the sack. "My silver has been returned," he said to his brothers. "It is here in my sack." Their hearts sank, and trembling, they turned to one another and said, "What is this that God has done to us?" When they reached their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they described to him all that had happened to them. "The man who is lord of the land spoke harshly to us and accused us of spying on the country. But we told him, 'We are honest men, not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of one father. One is no more, and the youngest is now with our father in the land of Canaan.' Then the man who is lord of the land said to us, 'This is how I will know whether you are honest. Leave one brother with me, take food to relieve the hunger of your households, and go. But bring your youngest brother back to me so I will know that you are not spies but honest men. Then I will give your brother back to you, and you can trade in the land.' As they began emptying their sacks, there in each man's sack was his bag of silver. And when they and their father saw the bags of silver, they were dismayed. Their father Jacob said to them, 'You have deprived me of my sons. Joseph is gone and Simeon is no more. Now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is going against me.' Then Reuben said to his father, 'You may kill my 2 sons if I fail to bring him back to you. Put him in my care, and I will return him.' But Jacob replied, 'My son will not go down there with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone is left. If any harm comes to him on your journey, you will bring my gray hair down to Sheol in sorrow.'" Genesis 43. Now the famine was still severe in the land. So when Jacob's sons had eaten all the grain they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go back and buy us a little more food." But Judah replied, "The man solemnly warned us, 'You will not see my face again unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy food for you. But if you will not send him, we will not go. For the man told us, "You will not see my face again unless your brother is with you."' 'Why did you bring this trouble upon me?' Israel asked. 'Why did you tell the man you had another brother?' They replied, 'The man questioned us in detail about ourselves and our family. Is your father still alive? Do you have another brother?' and we answered him accordingly. How could we possibly know that he would say, 'Bring your brother here'?" And Judah said to his father Israel, "Send the boy with me, and we will go at once, so that we may live and not die, neither we, nor you, nor our children. I will guarantee his safety. You may hold me personally responsible. If I do not bring him back and set him before you, then may I bear the guilt before you all my life. If we had not delayed, we could have come and gone twice by now." Then their father Israel said to them, "If it must be so, then do this. Put some of the best products of the land in your packs and carry them down as a gift for the man, a little balm and a little honey, spices and myrrh, pistachios and almonds. Take double the silver with you so that you may return the silver that was put back into the mouths of your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother as well and return to the man at once. May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, that he may release your other brother along with Benjamin. As for me, if I am bereaved, I am bereaved." So the men took these gifts, along with double the amount of silver, and Benjamin as well. Then they hurried down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with his brothers, he said to the steward of his house, "Take these men to my house, slaughter an animal and prepare it, for they shall dine with me at noon." The man did as Joseph had commanded and took the brothers to Joseph's house. But the brothers were frightened that they had been taken to Joseph's house. "We have been brought here because of the silver that was returned in our bags the first time," they said. "They intend to overpower us and take us as slaves, along with our donkeys." So they approached Joseph's steward and spoke to him at the entrance to the house. "Please, sir," they said, "we really did come down here the first time to buy food. But when we came to the place we lodged for the night, we opened our sacks, and behold, each of us found his silver in the mouth of his sack. It was the full amount of our silver, and we have brought it back with us. We have brought additional silver with us to buy food. We do not know who put our silver in our sacks." "It is fine," said the steward. "Do not be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, gave you the treasure that was in your sacks. I received your silver." Then he brought Simeon out to them, and the steward took the men into Joseph's house, gave them water to wash their feet, and provided food for their donkeys. Since the brothers had been told that they were going to eat a meal there, they prepared their gift for Joseph's arrival at noon. When Joseph came home, they presented him with the gifts they had brought, and they bowed to the ground before him. He asked if they were well, and then he asked, "How is your elderly father you told me about? Is he still alive?" "Your servant, our father, is well," they answered. "He is still alive." And they bowed down to honor him. When Joseph looked up and saw his brother Benjamin, his own mother's son, he asked, "Is this your youngest brother, the one you told me about?" Then he declared, "May God be gracious to you, my son." Joseph hurried out because he was moved to tears for his brother, and he went to a private room to weep. Then he washed his face and came back out. Regaining his composure, he said, "Serve the meal." They separately served Joseph, his brothers, and the Egyptians. They ate separately because the Egyptians would not eat with the Hebrews, since that was detestable to them. They were seated before Joseph in order by age, from the firstborn to the youngest, and the men looked at one another in astonishment. When the portions were served to them from Joseph's table, Benjamin's portion was 5 times larger than any of the others. So they feasted and drank freely with Joseph. Genesis 44. Then Joseph instructed his steward, "Fill the men's sacks with as much food as they can carry, and put each one's silver in the mouth of his sack. Put my cup, the silver one, in the mouth of the youngest one's sack, along with the silver for his grain." So the steward did as Joseph had instructed. At daybreak, the men were sent on their way with their donkeys. They had not gone far from the city when Joseph told his steward, "Pursue the men at once, and when you overtake them, ask, 'Why have you repaid good with evil? Is this not the cup my master drinks from and uses for divination? What you have done is wicked.'" When the steward overtook them, he relayed these words to them. "Why does my lord say these things?" they asked. "Your servants could not possibly do such a thing. We even brought back to you from the land of Canaan the silver we found in the mouths of our sacks. Why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If any of your servants is found to have it, he must die, and the rest will become slaves of my lord." "As you say," replied the steward, "but only the one who is found with the cup will be my slave, and the rest of you shall be free of blame." So each one quickly lowered his sack to the ground and opened it. The steward searched, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they all tore their clothes, loaded their donkeys, and returned to the city. When Judah and his brothers arrived at Joseph's house, he was still there, and they fell to the ground before him. "What is this deed you have done?" Joseph declared. "Do you not know that a man like me can surely divine the truth?" "What can we say to my lord?" Judah replied. "How can we plead? How can we justify ourselves? God has exposed the iniquity of your servants. We are now my lord's slaves, both we and the one who was found with the cup." But Joseph replied, "Far be it from me to do this. The man who was found with the cup will be my slave. The rest of you may return to your father in peace." Then Judah approached Joseph and said, "Sir, please let your servant speak personally to my lord. Do not be angry with your servant, for you are equal to Pharaoh himself." My lord asked his servants, "Do you have a father or a brother?" And we answered, "We have an elderly father and a younger brother, the child of his old age. The boy's brother is dead. He is the only one of his mother's sons left, and his father loves him." Then you told your servants, "Bring him down to me so that I can see him for myself." So we said to my lord, "The boy cannot leave his father. If he were to leave, his father would die." But you said to your servants, "Unless your younger brother comes down with you, you will not see my face again." Now when we returned to your servant, my father, we relayed your words to him. Then our father said, "Go back and buy us some food." But we answered, "We cannot go down there unless our younger brother goes with us. So if our younger brother is not with us, we cannot see the man." And your servant, my father, said to us, "You know that my wife bore me 2 sons. When one of them was gone, I said, 'Surely he has been torn to pieces,' and I have not seen him since. Now if you also take this one from me, and harm comes to him, you will bring my gray hair down to Sheol in sorrow. So if the boy is not with us when I return to your servant, and if my father, whose life is wrapped up in the boy's life, sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. Then your servants will have brought the gray hair of your servant, our father, down to Sheol in sorrow." Indeed, your servant guaranteed the boy's safety to my father, saying, "If I do not return him to you, I will bear the guilt before you, my father, all my life. Now please let your servant stay here as my lord's slave in place of the boy. Let him return with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father without the boy? I could not bear to see the misery that would overwhelm him." Genesis 45. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, "Send everyone away from me." So none of them were with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers, but he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household soon heard of it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But they were unable to answer him because they were terrified in his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Please come near me." And they did so. "I am Joseph, your brother," he said, "the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves that you sold me into this place, because it was to save lives that God sent me before you. For the famine has covered the land these 2 years, and there will be 5 more years without plowing or harvesting. God sent me before you to preserve you as a remnant on the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Therefore it was not you who sent me here, But God, who has made me a father to Pharaoh, Lord of all his household and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Now return quickly to my father and tell him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me without delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen and be near me, you and your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds and everything you own. And there I will provide for you, because there will be 5 more years of famine. Otherwise, you and your household and everything you own will come to destitution. Behold, you and my brother Benjamin can see that I, Joseph, am the one speaking with you. Tell my father about all my splendor in Egypt and everything you have seen, and bring my father down here quickly." Then Joseph threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept, and Benjamin wept as they embraced. Joseph kissed each of his brothers as he wept over them, and afterward his brothers talked with him. When the news reached Pharaoh's house that Joseph's brothers had come, Pharaoh and his servants were pleased. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Tell your brothers, do as follows. Load your animals and return to the land of Canaan. Then bring your father and your families and return to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you shall eat from the fat of the land." You are also directed to tell them, "Take wagons from the land of Egypt for your young children and your wives, and bring your father and come back. But pay no regard to your belongings, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours." So the sons of Israel did as they were told. Joseph gave them wagons as Pharaoh had instructed, and he also gave them provisions for their journey. He gave new garments to each of them, but to Benjamin he gave 300 shekels of silver and 5 sets of clothes. And he sent to his father the following: 10 donkeys loaded with the best of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread and provisions for his father's journey. Then Joseph sent his brothers on their way, and as they were leaving, he said to them, "Do not quarrel on the way." So the brothers went up out of Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. "Joseph is still alive there," they said, "and he is ruler over all the land of Egypt." But Jacob was stunned, for he did not believe them. However, when they relayed all that Joseph had told them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him back, the spirit of their father Jacob was revived. "Enough," declared Israel. "My son Joseph is still alive. I will go to see him before I die." And with that, we bring today's reading to a close. May these sacred words dwell richly in your heart and guide your path in wisdom and truth. Until we meet again to continue our journey through the Holy Scriptures, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Go in his peace.